Welcome to today's conversation, Permission Granted. It is time for you to give yourself permission to be your own point of reference by which your life success is measured. It is time for your approval to be the standard. Join us for our conversation today, Permission Granted. During our life journey, we spend a lot of time asking questions, asking permission, and it starts very early in our childhood, where as children, we were trained to ask permission first. And that asking permission mentality has traveled with us through our adult journey. And so sometimes we are so conditioned to asking permission, we forget to just be. So, today's conversation is to encourage you to stop asking for permission to be you, to define what being you means and what it looks like, what the success and winning looks like, and to just be. So, when we think about permission granted, I always like to start with looking at the definition of the words that we are conversing about. So, permission means I'm allowed to, I give myself the go ahead. And granted is to permit something as a right or privilege. So when we talk about permission granted, we're talking about you giving yourself the go ahead as a right and a privilege to be the standard by which you measure your life success. So when we think about permission granted can be seen as a type of restraint or it can be seen as a source of empowerment. If you think about the childhood games that at least I used to play, one of them was Mother May I. And so you with a group of my childhood friends would be standing at the starting line. And then we would just think of creative things that we could do to move forward from the starting line towards the finishing line, where the person who was serving as the captain would be standing. And so we would say things like, Mother, may I take two giant steps, or Mother, may I take two baby steps. And then the person would decide whether or not they're going to say yes or no to us. The other game that we used to play was the game called Red Light, Green Light, Stop. And so, again, this is where you have a leader, and when they're saying, red light, green light, stop, you get to put yourself in motion and you can travel as far as you can go until you hear the word stop. Again, this being trained as a young person, that there was permission that was needed in order to have some sense of momentum, a sense of crossing over that finishing line. But permission granted can also be a source of empowerment because the person who was controlling the game was also empowered to give us a yes or a no. But it was also empowering because the person was at the finishing line. And so there was a visualization and a goal. I like this quote by Melissa Wilkins that says, we are all both and brave and scared, messy and real, gloriously imperfect, and absolutely enough. So when you think about your granting yourself permission to be the standard by which you succeed in life and by which you measure that success, I want you to remember that you're both and you've got permission and you've also been granted permission to succeed. When I was looking up this whole, you know, topic of permission granted, I ran across some research that was done by an English teacher, and she titled her work 15 Ways to Ask for Permission. And most of it was based on what happens inside of a classroom, but it also translates into what we tend to do sometimes as adults when we may intentionally or unintentionally be asking somebody else for permission for us to succeed in life. So, some of the 15 ways to ask for permissions like may I, can I, could I, would I be able to, do you mind if I, do you think I should, what do you think if I, and then finally coming to a point of saying, I think I'm going to And then you ask, but is that okay? Yes, it's okay. It's okay for you to give yourself permission to ask yourself questions about your self granted permissions of moving forward, of finding out what it works for you. What does it look like for you to be winning? And I want to just remind you, no one else can define that for you. Yeah, there are standards, there are benchmarks, there are milestones, there are measurements of progress, there are all these things. But when it comes to your individual life success, there's only two sources of your life purpose to ensure your life success. One is the person who gave you the purpose in the first place, and that's God. And secondly, you, because you get to choose whether or not you want to embrace that God designed purpose. So, one of the ways that we can constantly grant ourselves permission to be in charge of our forward motion and our forward movement is to choose purpose over permission. Stop asking about permission and seek purpose. Even when we look at the Bible and it tells us about, asking it should be given to you, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open. All of that is really not about permission, it's really about seeking purpose, your purpose behind that door. There's another quote that I saw on this website, and it said, the more you approve of your own decisions in life, the less you feel the need to have them approved or accepted by others. Remember, when you and I make decisions, we are the first recipient of the consequences of their decisions, good, bad, or indifferent. Yes, our decisions may affect others, but the first person who is impacted by those decisions is going to be the person who makes the decision. So when we choose to make decisions based on the best information that we have available, the level of risk that we may be willing to take, the unknown consequences, and like my friend Joyce Meyer say, just step out and find out, knowing that we are kind of kept in a safety zone by the loving embrace of God. So even when we step out to find out, we still have a measure of security that you and I can be confident in. Some awakening moments that I want you to think about as you're thinking about granting yourself permission to be the standard by which you are measuring up, and not some type of external influence or external opinions or ideas that someone else may have about your life. You will just know this. I've heard this over and over again. You will never be good enough to meet everyone's expectations of you. There's always going to be someone who has an expectation of you that is different from who you are, your identity, what your goals are, what your passions are. You're never, ever going to meet everyone's expectations. And that's just not in your outer circle, even within your inner circle, even within your family circle. You're never going to meet everyone's expectations, nor will anyone ever meet all of your expectations. Brené Brown, who's the author of Daring Greatly, says courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen, letting our true, authentic selves be seen. Not that I want to be, not the fake it till I make it, not who you expect me to be, but just showing up as me, showing up with all my both ands parts of me. Michelle Obama says, am I good enough? Yes, I am. And you say that with me. Yes, I am. I am good enough. The question may arise as you go through different journeys, as you work on different, hard spots. You meet different bumps in the road, and you may wonder, am I good enough to take this next step? Am I good enough to write the book? Am I good enough to be, a parent? Am I good enough to do whatever that is? Yes, you are, because again, you are not operating within your own self sufficiency. You are operating prayerfully with the anointing of God, who enables you to be and to do and to go that which he has purposed. And again, Muhammad Ali says, I'm the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was. What is your I am the greatest? We can't always wait until we see the realization of our better self, of our best self, to be able to believe and then to proclaim that I am the greatest. So I want you to think about being the standard. And being the standard is about choosing purpose over perfection. Because with perfection, you're going to miss the mark every time. So give yourself permission to be purposeful, to be on purpose and in purpose. So I want you to think about, how would you rate your self acceptance when you experience a lack of success? And realize, note that I did not say when you experience failure. I said a lack of success at something on a scale of 1 to 10. Are you the person that says, I never win, it's no sense in trying? Or do you kind of give yourself some wiggle room and say, I almost made it this time? And at the top of that is, I'm learning forward mindset. So some people say I'm failing forward, but I like to say that I am learning forward. I'm learning from my mistakes. I'm growing in the knowledge of what did not work the last time and what I may need to take forward. The second part of that was, how would you rate your acknowledgement of winning at being you? I think about when we go to the doctor and they ask us about your pain on a scale of 1 to 10. Most of us quickly give out a number, and sometimes we elevate that number because to us, the pain is probably greater than it really is. And so we're very quick to rate our pain or our hard moments at a high level, but we tend to be slow to rate ourselves at where we are with winning. So are you a 1 where you can say failure is still progress, that I may be learning, I may be learning forward, but I'm still making progress? Am I walking in a learning forward mindset? Or are you having more days where you choose to celebrate your wins? So if it's so easy for us to rate our pain, why is it so hard for us to rate our wins at celebrating us? So give yourself permission, and giving yourself permission starts with learning to trust yourself. Trust that you got it right, that when you did some self reflections and you looked on the inside, that what you thought you knew about yourself, that you got some of that right. We are constantly evolving, but you've got to learn to trust that you know yourself, because you know yourself better than anyone else. Let go of your need for approval from others and self approval. Just let go of it and just be. Just learn to trust where you are in the moment, on this day, on this time, and at this step. Say yes to yourself. So many people may say no to you when you're seeking approval and you're seeking permission. Maybe wrong timing, maybe wrong place, maybe it's not something that you're even purposed to do. So we're used to hearing a lot of no's. So why not give yourself a yes? Give yourself that first yes. When you wake up in the morning, give yourself that first yes. Yes, I am enough for this day. Yes, I don't know what the day holds, but I am enough for whatever today's hold. So give yourself the first yes before you give anybody else the opportunity to give you a no. Say no to anything that is not your true identity, your purpose, and whatever requires a no. And you have to give yourself permission to do that. No one else is going to give you that permission. I think approval ratings are so overrated. Everybody is rating everything and everyone about something. There are popularities ratings. There's, ratings on social media. There's ratings when we're going through the political election process. I just think ratings are so overrated because it's still based on what is externally discerned, an external perspective. So you should not be pursuing ratings. You should not be pursuing ratings. You should be in pursuit of granting yourself permission to succeed at what it is that you have been purposed to do. Two things that I like to say is I give myself permission to win. So when I'm having a struggle and I'm dealing with a hard task, something that's a new skills, I have to give myself permission to win, to move from that hard spot to be learning forward, to get across that finish line. Many years ago, when I was struggling with the workplace challenge, and I made the mistake of seeking randomly some opinions about something that I was proposing to implement. And I got all sorts of stuff that had nothing to do with the survey. I opened the door for people to take an opportunity to just throw darts at me. And it left me emotionally bruised, I guess is the right way to say it. And so I had to go through a process of seeking mentors and talking through that whole process. And one of the things that someone said to me was this: what others think of me is none of my business. And what I think of myself is none of theirs. Those words have really been a uh, foundation or a stepping stone for me. Because when we allow ourselves to get so caught up in other people's opinions and approvals and criticisms and ratings, it's never good for us and it never ends good for us. And I'm not talking about not seeking, um, counsel or seeking mentoring or coaching. I'm talking about when you're allowing someone else to define your success. Someone else is telling you when you should or should not be approving of yourself. Galatians 1:10 says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. I mentioned earlier that the one person who gives you the ultimate approval for who you are is because he created you. So he's not going to not approve himself. God is not going to not approve who he created you to be. So just remember, approval ratings are so overrated. You get a rating in the morning and it's changed in the afternoon. You could say, be on a high in your ratings, and you say one wrong word on social media and you just bottom out in terms of ratings and people's approval. So you have to be willing to know that you're more than that. You are more than that. You are irreplaceable. So when you subject yourselves to other people's approval, you allow them to move you out of your zone into another zone, into a lesser zone, or even into what they think is a place of elevation. But you are irreplaceable. And just remember, Morgan Nichols has this quote that I love, and it says, just because they're succeeding before you, that doesn't mean that they're succeeding in replacement of you. There will still be a place for you. There will always be a place for you. So there's no competition. Everyone is in their lane. And so when you're looking at people at different points in their careers, and you're thinking that, gosh, I'm so far behind, I'm never going to catch up on this. I'm just writing the first sentence in the book, and here's somebody who's published 10 books. And I've been writing longer than they are thinking about and contemplating this writing long before they have. You are irreplaceable because God tells us in Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plan, the unique plan, the original plan, the one of a kind. Nobody has ever been you before. No one will ever be you again, that he has for you to give you a future and a hope. So know that you are irreplaceable by God's design. And so it's really not a competition. It's really not you're measuring where you are versus where someone else. So one of the things that you may have to do is what I call rekindle your inner flame. Go to that deep place where you find what was my spark. When I felt good about myself, when I saw myself winning at being me, what was going on the inside of me? What was I saying to myself? What was the truth that I was proclaiming over myself? What is that self knowledge that I was holding on to? You've got to fan the flame, the gracious gifts of God that He has put in you, all the good stuff that nobody can really, they may see manifestations of it, but they don't see the totality of it. So you know your total self. So take all of that, those special endowments, that inner fire that God has given you, and just be bold with it because He hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but one of power and of a sound mind. You know, in ancient times, embers were kept slowly burning so that they could be fanned into flames when a fire was needed. Today, you need to realize that your fire is still needed. Your fire is still needed. And I want you to think about a rose when it is blooming. There's, the roses on the bush, they come to full bloom and manifestation at different points. Just because one rose is in full bloom and one is still budding, it does not replace the fact that they are still a rose. So as you rekindle your inner flame, you need to understand that even the underdeveloped or still to develop parts of you doesn't change the totality of who you were created to be. So I want you to just give your self permission to be you. Give yourself your own stamp of approval and just say that I give myself permission to be me. So what does your permission granted profile look like? We talked earlier about, the ratings. How do you rate yourself when you're experiencing a lack of success? How do you rate yourself when you're experiencing success? So what is your permission granted profile? I want you to just take a few minutes as you're listening to this, and I want you to identify what your winning tens are. What is that 10 mark that you feel very confident, or even if you're not confident about it, let's walk by faith and not by sight. What are your winning tens on your journey to becoming your better self? I want you to own the tens. Don't shy away from them. Don't step back saying, I can't possibly be a 10 in this because that would mean perfection. No, that just means purpose. And I want you to just, if you don't mind, share with me in your comments, what are some winning tens for you? Where are the places that you have given yourself permission to acknowledge what your wins are? I want to just share with you some what I call the permission granted spiritual empowerment checklist. And these are just some scriptures that you can just kind of reflect on as you are, doing the replay or doing our live time. And just, I love the very first one, Psalms 139. I praise you for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. So if you didn't even go through the rest of the list, if you would just accept the fact that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, I think that you would see a big change in how you grant yourself permission to be the standard by which your life success. So just think about and reflect on these scriptures and these truths as you look at ways to be empowered to grant yourself permission. So my challenge for you today is to stop asking, start being, start celebrating you, start celebrating being, less asking and more being. So today is that day for you to stop asking others for permission to set the standards for your life's wins. Embrace, emerge, execute, and elevate being your version of yourself. So repeat after me again. I give myself permission to win on purpose. Again, stop asking others permission to set the standard for your life. You are the standard. God is the first and only real standard. And as you walk out in his plan, his purpose, the path that he has created for you, then you know that you are on the track to becoming the best version of you, and that you've given yourself permission to own that. So doing when you go through the elections, you see all these campaign commercials and promotions, and you will have someone giving a reference, a point of reference for the person that's running for office. And they say all these wonderful things about the person that they are promoting. But at the end of it, what gives it value is the candidate themselves says, I approve this message. So if the person didn't validate all the good stuff, all the strengths that the person who was promoting them said, then that would leave some, kind of questions about, did this person even believe this about themselves? But when the person says, I approve this message, and they sign their names to it, that's what I want to encourage and invite you to do today. What is the message about your being and defining your own life success that you can say, I approve this message and sign off on it? So give yourself permission to embrace your present self. Give yourself permission to discover more of who you are. Give yourself permission to pause, to press rewind, and to press forward towards your purpose. I give myself permission right now to stop asking and to start being. And I want to encourage and invite you to do the same. Find those areas in your life where you just need to stop asking for permission and start being, start doing it. I give myself permission to ignite the inner gifts to fully become all that God has designed for me to be. In thinking about today's conversation, I was thinking about all the times when I was so caught up into, taking these profiles, doing these ratings, and adding up the numbers and having someone else tell me what a win would look like for me. But the day that I started really discovering that I can give myself permission to be winning at wherever I'm at on my journey to becoming who God purposed for me to be, that was an eye opener for me. So I just want to encourage you to dig deep, dig wide, and find your tens, your wins, and celebrate those. And if you are wanting someone to help you to take that deep dive, to do that self reflection, to look at what does permission granted look for you, please feel free to contact us at Life Purpose by Design. We would be so honored and privileged to help you on the journey to discover your life purpose with clarity, intentionality, and resilience. Thank you for joining us here at Life Purpose by Design for our conversation, Permission Granted. Now, stop asking and start being.